Geeks and geekettes, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, comic book fans the world over, welcome once again back to, and gats and kittens. Again, welcome back to Ask Chuck Dixon, where you get to ask me questions about what I do for a living. What I do for a living is I write comic books. Let's get right to it. Emmerich Malan, I'm a budding author. As I write my book, I find that several ideas I come up with later in my writing, for example, many chapters down the line, dovetail nicely with the things I wrote months ago. None of this was planned ahead, although I do plot out my story at a high level. Would that be a good indication I'm doing something right? As an experienced writer who has written many comics and books, have you found this to happen to you as well? Or am I just barking up the wrong tree here? Yeah, that's what I call a good day. I mean, you're on a roll if everything's gelling, everything's coming together. I don't outline apparently anywhere near to the degree that you do. I just sort of fire ahead with a general idea. But it's a great day when everything comes together, and things happen later in the story that either resonate with things that happened earlier or help make more sense of the story. Whatever, you know, when all the trains are running on time in your imagination, and it all just seems to come together. A lot of writers give the advice, and I don't give writer advice. I just tell you what I do. A lot of writers give the advice that you should never go back and rewrite in the middle of writing something. You should just bull ahead to the end. But I find it helpful sometimes to go back to the beginning and sort of recapture the feel I had when I started the book, to make sure I don't lose it. So I will often, one third, one halfway through a book, go back and do a rewrite, just kind of a light rewrite to, refamiliarize myself with the material, remind myself of where I was going. I probably wouldn't have to do that if I outlined more, but that's the way I do it. Again, not telling anybody that that's the way they should do it. But my hat's off to you. If you're having days like that, you're doing the right thing. I mean, if writing feels good, writing feels natural, it feels like it's coming together. I mean, it always doesn't feel that way. Sometimes it's an uphill slog when you're writing. Sometimes you're fighting against the wind. Sometimes it feels like, gosh, this idea is so stupid. Why did I start this? There's always that point in the middle of writing a novel. But if everything's going, keep going. And those days get you through the tough days, those good days. You look back on them and, you hope you're going to have another one of them tomorrow. Now I'm making writing sound like ditch digging. It's not. It's not that hard. Writers exaggerate how hard it is or how much they suffer, probably to get attention and sympathy. I'm not that kind of writer. So, Kenny Todd, Car Warriors, you said in the video that it was a role-playing game. Is the storytelling approach different? What direction, if any, were you given? Were any of your elements used in future installments of the game? If there were any, great story, beautiful art. Yeah, I mean, Carl Potts just sort of assigned this to me out of the blue. He was editing at Epic, and he thought I'd be a good fit for this. And the Car Warriors game, I mean, they sent me, I think, some booklets. Back then games were just basically booklets. They weren't as complex as games are now with all the miniature pieces and huge maps and everything else. So it was largely a strategy game. And if I remember right, there weren't any established characters. I had to establish characters and personalities for the series. So a lot of it was left up to me. I had very little guidance. So I just sort of wrote a, Road Warrior kind of story. I made up a race across the Mackinac from the Upper Peninsula of Michigan to the Lower Peninsula, climaxing at the Mackinac Bridge. And I just had a whole lot of fun. When I was done with it, Carl told me that he had a lot of negative feedback from the game producer, who thought that I was thought the game producer thought they knew where the story was going. They thought that I was doing something predictable, and Carl said that, trust me, Chuck will do anything but something predictable with the story. And I hope I made Carl proud. So, But I had fun. I got to work with Steve Dillon and Phil Winslade, and we just sort of tore it up for a few issues. And I don't know if they use I know the game is still around because one of my sons is really into gaming. So the game is still around in some form, but I don't know if they ever used any of my characters or scenarios. Never really even thought about that before. Hey, Kenny Todd, Twin Spin. Kenny Todd again. Storming Paradise is a tremendous and scary story at the same time. Are there any plans for a sequel? I recently talking about Storming Paradise a lot has increased interest in this. People are starting to go out and look for it and coming back to me about it. I never really planned a sequel because this wasn't a comic that was bound to sell a whole lot. Butch Geist and I had a feeling or a dream that maybe it would be adapted into a video game. It would be used for a scenario for something like Call of Duty or something like that, but it never was. It didn't go any further than that. This was a creator-owned project done for Wildstorm. I'm gonna have to look into getting the film back from this, the digital files back from this, and doing a reprint because the rights reverted to Butch and I long ago, and we're free to republish it whenever. And with the renewed interest in it, I think it's worthwhile putting this book back in publication. But we never planned a sequel. This was it. I think it tells the story we wanted to tell. Yes, it does not get to the ultimate conclusion because I'm not so certain this military mission would have succeeded. That's how desperately the Japanese were holding on to their home islands. I mean, quite understandable. They were their home islands. I'm not certain that the fight wouldn't have gotten so desperate, so horrible, so costly that the American public would have demanded an end to it, and some sort of conditional surrender would have been reached. So I wasn't, neither Butch nor I were ready to posit where all of this might have gone, what the conclusion of this would have been. And quite frankly, the most logical conclusion is that we would have fought. We would have fought with Japan to the point of the annihilation of the Japanese culture. I really didn't want to write that story because it could get kind of ugly, a bit of a downer. Not that Storming Paradise is the feel-good comic of the year by any means, but to go even darker on it, not something I wanted to. Not something I look forward to doing. Triple spin. Kenny gets a triple spin. Warman. How did this story come about? Why only 2 issues? Cool Liam Sharp covers. Looking at the cover, you would think it's a Punisher story, but he's definitely not the Punisher. Were there any plans to cross them over? I saw on one of the other panels, it has your last name and the artist. I've seen this in other comics over the years. Is it for editors to keep track of the original art, of which creators did the story? I imagine they deal with a lot of original art. You want to mix pages. Have you ever known that to happen? Pages from one story put mistakenly into another story. That's a lot of questions. So Warman was only ever meant to be, basically, I just wanted to write a graphic novel, and I wanted to work with Juan Zanato, Argentine artist. They had a chance to meet and really dug his work. Big time talent down there in Argentina. I wanted to work with him. He was anxious to expose his artwork to the American audience. And once again, Carl Potts was saying he needed material to fill out the heavy hitters line. And did I have anything? And I thought, well, yeah, let me and Juan work up this Warman scenario. It's basically about a gun runner who gets, he's aboard a jumbo jet that gets shot down over the Amazonian jungle by cocaine drug lords, by one of the cartels. And then he has to lead the passengers out of this, primordial hell to safety, big action movie stuff. And the thing is, this was actually considered for about, 15 minutes by Fox for Die Hard 4. They were going to make, they were looking at this to be the scenario for the 4th Bruce Willis movie, in which Britney Spears was going to play John McClane's daughter. So maybe it's best that didn't happen. But anyway, And speaking of original art, I mean, the original art on this, I wish I knew where the original art for Warman was, and the original art files. Epic no longer has them. This book was simultaneously printed in Italy by Eroa, and I have been after them for years to let me have the original art files so I can do decent reprints of it here in the United States. I only have a set of Xeroxes, which really don't do us much good. They're not clear enough for publication. If you want to read Warman, though, it is on ArcTunes. The whole thing is on ArcTunes. You can read it digitally on your phone or device or whatever you're listening to me on or watching me on. You can read all of Warman. And as far as original art, I suppose the companies do what they always did. They have an original art return person whose only job is packing up original art and sending it off to the pencilers and inkers. Traditionally, pencilers and inkers are the ones to receive original art. Once upon a time, writers got it, which I never thought was fair, even as a writer, and I love original art. I never thought it was fair that writers got any of the art because they didn't work on it. They didn't put the labor in on that paper. And there we go. Another question. Jonas Camp. I was wondering how your experience is working on Winterworld with Jorge Zaffino. He was such an immensely talented artist. Winterworld is great writing and art. Thank you. How did the project come about, and how much of a collaboration was between you and two of you as far as the final product? Was there a lot of back and forth of ideas about the approach of the story? Once again, it was a matter of product. Eclipse was looking for product to print at the time, and once again, I had met all of these Argentine artists through the Villagrán brothers, and I wanted to work with them. I just thought their art was fantastic. I saw Jorge's artwork and immediately thought, man, we got to do something post-apocalyptic that has a lot of weather and like brutal climate conditions in it, because that's just what his artwork said to me. Very much like Joe Kubert artwork suggested, more organic kind of story, a man against nature kind of thing. And I really wanted to put all that together. And, Eclipse was very anxious to work with Jorge. And since I was the conduit to Jorge, I got to write this fantastic, post-apocalyptic adventure with him that, by a lot of people is considered to be a classic. And we eventually got to do a sequel to it, Winter Sea, which eventually was published by IDW. You can probably still find them both in a paperback and hardcover edition somewhere. Personally, I don't think Winterworld should ever be out of print. I might have to see that myself, since the rights have reverted back to me. The printing rights have reverted back to me from IDW. And there wasn't a lot of back and forth because Jorge didn't speak English. I didn't speak Spanish. It was a long distance thing. He was down in Buenos Aires working on this. But I like to think, and he liked to think, that there was a connection, some sort of a connection between the two of us, that we liked the same kind of thing, and we really collaborated on the page. I mean, the only hiccup was he was working with a translator, and I had Scully, one of the main characters in the story, he was hunting elk, and apparently his Argentine translator had no idea what an elk was, and so Jorge just drew baboons with tusks. he just imagined in this future frozen world that somehow baboons would evolve tusks and live in the snow. It was all cool. It was a beautifully drawn baboons with tusks. So I said, okay, fine, we're going with this. But that was the only hiccup. Otherwise, I mean, he did an amazing interpretation of my story. I can't complain at all. He managed to satisfy my one proviso that all the artists that I work with make me look like a genius, which he did. Plus, he's just a terrific guy. I got to meet him a couple of times. I met him in Buenos Aires. This photo was taken at the airport on the day I was leaving. And we got to meet again a couple of times in New York City when he visited Marvel in DC. So, but an awesome guy. Left us way too soon. Left us way too soon. What a genius. Ace Mowick. I believe you once talked about the plot of Gotham Knights 32 featuring the day in the life of Bruce Wayne story. Do you think it would be beneficial for this type of story to be used for more characters across DC to break up any perceived monotony, showing how relatable the heroes can be for potentially new readers while acting as a jumping on point, and what might have to be implemented so it does not become too gimmicky? Hold on, wrong picture. Actually, it's Detective 711 you're talking about. I never worked on Gotham Knights. Detective 711 was a story in which we never see Batman. It's Bruce Wayne on a date, and what might happen if Bruce Wayne ran into Batman type challenges but could not change into Batman, and had to solve them as Bruce Wayne without revealing his true persona. Still being the effete, feckless billionaire playboy. Man, it was a lot of fun to write this and work on it. I think Graham had a good time on it too. It was coming up with the challenges, making it fun. Doing an action story. Not necessarily a day in the life story, because that would have just been Bruce Wayne golfing and maybe going to a board meeting. Which what are you going to do with that? We sort of created this scenario where Bruce has to, be Batman without becoming Batman. And it was a lot of fun to work on. And I think that, I did a lot of Bruce Wayne stuff. I worked a lot of Bruce Wayne scenes into my Batman stories because I liked writing the character of Bruce Wayne. I liked playing with the idea of a guy who's perfectly capable but has to hide his light under a bushel, as it were. He has to hide his capabilities and yet in a sly way still manipulate the events around him without appearing to be the main actor, without appearing to be the shot caller. Also taking a lot of crap as Bruce Wayne. His neighbor, J. Devlin Davenport, in my stories routinely did everything he could to humiliate Bruce in every way, either on the tennis court or the golf course. Things like that. And I liked writing those scenes. I really liked it, as much as I liked writing, Tim Drake at school and things like that. I mean, it really brings out the believability, the relatability of the characters. And I think these things are important. I think for any character, so much of the original run of Spider-Man, which, I mean, if you've listened to these videos by now, that's like my Torah, that's my Bible of comics, is that initial Steve Ditko run of Spider-Man. And an awful lot of that material was Peter Parker. It wasn't Spider-Man. It was establishing Peter Parker so that we related to him. So when he became Spider-Man, we understood who he was. And a lot of the story, a lot of the drama was on the Peter Parker side rather than the Spider-Man side. And I think that's true for any character that has a secret identity like that. These superhero characters, it's important we see their other life. Be it Clark Kent or, Barbara Gordon or whatever. We need to see that other life they have to make them relatable. And, a lot of stories arise out of that. And continuity arises out of that, because as they defeat each villain in every story, which is what a superhero does, they move on to the next story. The only real continuity is that secret identity life that carries you from issue to issue. Okay, Craig S. I recently responded to your Facebook post promoting the new Nexus series, and it got me thinking, what are your thoughts on the potential crossover between Nexus and Judge Dredd? Although they don't share the same universe, Nexus has crossed realities before, and when he encountered Magnus Robot Fighter and Madman. Do you think they'd be allies or adversaries? Dredd isn't the usual authoritarian mass murderer that Nexus typically targets, but he has a high body count and embodies the ideals of a police state. On the other hand, many of Dredd's enemies would definitely fit Nexus's criteria. Whether they clashed or teamed up, it might make for a complex and fascinating storyline. Well, I'm a sucker for crossovers, and this one would be awesome. And I would love to see Mike Baron write this. Now, where might I take it? Yeah, you're right. I mean, would Nexus arrive in the universe of Mega City 1 and be conflicted, not real sure what side he should be on? what would be his mission here? Dredd certainly, without the imprimatur of the law behind him, is a mass murderer. I mean, just knocking people off willy-nilly, judging them, judging and executing them. And would Nexus be in opposition to that? And I think the logical place to take a story like this is to have Nexus arrive. Not real sure. Maybe he arrives in this universe by accident. As a result of some catastrophe in his own reality, he's swept into this weird dystopic version of planet Earth, and he has to basically decide, what's my role here, and my natural instinct would be to introduce a greater threat. In every crossover, the two crossover characters are in conflict at first, and then join against a common threat. And I don't think you would break that formula for Nexus and Judge Dredd. Boy, I'd love to see this. I can think of a dozen artists I'd love to see draw Nexus meets Judge Dredd. It's never going to happen, but one never knows. One never knows. John Bua, hey, it's another Judge Dredd crossover question. Let's pretend that Frank Castle gets somehow transported to Mega City 1. Now he catches the eye of the powers that be and they offer him a judgeship. How does Frank react? Does he reject being Judge Castle? Does he become the law? And would this put him into conflict with Dredd? It certainly put him in a rivalry with Dredd. I could see Dredd being suspicious of this guy. He comes out of nowhere. He's got no ID. He's, obviously human, but a genetic anomaly in that he's not registered in any way. He's a complete stranger to this reality, and Dredd would be suspicious. Keep a watchful eye on him. Frank Castle, for his part, would love Mega City 1 because he'd be given carte blanche to kill all the criminals in the world. And, again, this is a crossover. It's never going to happen. But the direction I would take it in is that even with the free reign that the judges in Mega City 1 have to battle crime, Frank Castle would still feel constrained by rules, which of course Judge Dredd follows to the letter. And I can see where, Frank Castle would be made a judge, but eventually be put on trial. And his sentence would be that he would be sent to the cursed earth, which Frank would dig. It's like today's parents when they, go to your room. My room is where all my cool stuff is. I'll stay in my room forever. And that would be Frank Castle. So that's where I would take it. Were I to, in some alternate universe, get to write Judge Dredd and the Punisher in a story together. Kane Dorr. You recently provided a Facebook post with your thoughts on the Russell Crowe movie Land of Bad. One element of the movie I really enjoyed was the relationship between the drone operators and the field operators over comms radio due to distance. I'm intrigued by the type of relationship in regards to using it within writing storytelling. In fact, I always wanted to see more of that sort of thing at the heart of a Bat book featuring Oracle and how she congruently supporting many of the masked Gothamites. Hell, an animated series would be great fun. Have you ever used the above type of long-distance character interaction style to a large degree as a primary narrative style at the heart of a story or series? I'd love to know your thoughts on it. Yeah, the long-distance relationship, the drone operator, field operator thing, was the premise of Birds of Prey. The earliest issues of Birds of Prey had Black Canary directed and funded and equipped by this unknown entity called Oracle. No idea, Black Canary had no idea who she was working for. She just knew that this person guiding her and sending her on missions was on the side of the angels. And, basically helping her out of a bad spot she was in her life emotionally and otherwise. So yeah, I mean, that was the basis. So I have written that kind of story extensively. And even after the two of them meet, they continue the drone operator, field operator relationship with Oracle directing actions from a distance and dealing with all the complications of that. Where things go wrong, communications drop out, intel is inaccurate. Largely, Birds of Prey was a series of deconstructed plot lines because of the complications, because nothing is perfect, because technology fails, because there are shortcomings of the age of information that we supposedly live in. And I dealt with a lot of that. But yeah, I mean, that's cool stuff. I haven't done anything like that since then, because I kind of like, said everything I have to say on that subject. But there you go. Joshua Ignatowski, have you seen the sci-fi movie The Black Hole that came out in the 70s? If so, what are your thoughts on it? I personally found the fact the film never went more into detail of what happened afterwards to be an aspect of it that left much to be desired. Yeah, Black Hole came out. It was all the studios were in a rush to do Star Wars, get their Star Wars thing together, and Disney was one of them. The thing I most vividly recall about this movie was that I think the week or 2 weeks before, I'd taken my nephews, my young nephews, they were kids, to see Star Trek the motion picture, and they were bored out of their minds. And I remember at the end of the movie apologizing, saying, look, I'm sorry, but there's a more action-oriented sci-fi movie coming out in a couple of weeks. I think it's more up your alley. And I took them to see The Black Hole, and they dug it. They liked it. And, it's action-packed. It's crazy. It's high concept. But it's Disney. And Disney, ever since Walt died, Disney has had this attitude that they're perfect at everything and everything they do is wonderful and they've got all the answers. And they went back to all of their, they made the movie too Disney. And, the goofy robot characters. And they probably thought, oh, C-3PO and R2-D2, we'll do something like that. So they do this like silly, almost hillbilly bears version of, of droids. And it just doesn't work. This has got a terrific cast. I mean, Maximilian Schell, Robert Forster, Ernest Borgnine, Yvette Mimieux. I mean, it's got a terrific cast. The effects were, kind of different. They, because Disney thinks they got all the answers, they made approaches to the effects. They were a little bit antiquated. They built enormous miniatures. If I remember right, they built a miniature of the main ship. They actually built it from steel. It probably exists somewhere. It's probably in a warehouse somewhere. And it was huge, this huge thing. So, they made this effort, but I don't think it didn't take off at the box office. It's largely a failure. It's funny because you don't like the ending. One of the things I like about it is the ambiguous ending as to what would happen if you went through a black hole and what you would find on the other side. Now, one of the reasons they left it ambiguous at the end might have been that they were thinking that this is going to be a huge hit and we're going to have to do sequels of the crew of this ship on the other side of the black hole. But of course, that was never to be because the movie did not perform. They couldn't make up what it was. It's just a straight up hard science fiction film or a adventure movie for kids. And to me, it satisfied neither criteria. Twin spin. Joshua again. Previously in this show, you've gone over some of the dumbest things you've ever heard editors say. On the other hand, what would you list as being some of the smartest things you'd heard editors say? Well, Archie Goodwin was a font of wisdom. He always had, smart and funny things to say. His guidance was always welcome. I remember I was reluctant. I was resistant to the idea of taking the Robert McKee story structure course. It's a 3-day seminar. It's boot camp for writers. And Archie and Denny were big proponents of taking it to the point where they, had DC pay for the seminar, which wasn't cheap, and pay for writers to spend the weekend in New York going to the seminar. So I got, 3 nights at a hotel, all paid for by DC, and got to go to this seminar. But I was reluctant. I was resistant because, as I've said often, and as I've said in this video, I don't like how-tos. I don't like other writers doing how-tos. Like, you need to do this. You need setting down ground rules, putting goalposts up for writers. I don't think that you should have rules. I don't think you should have goalposts. I think writers should just be free to imagine without any, framework or template or formula forced upon them. And something like a course called Story Structure sounded like math. It sounded like, oh God, it's going to be dreadful. It's going to be boring. It's going to be so awful. It wasn't any of those things. But, well, it was awful for some people because McKee could be abusive. But anyway, Archie was the big. Denny didn't convince me that I wanted to go to it. And it was Archie. Archie said I found it very helpful, and he says largely I found it helpful to get me started writing on those days I didn't feel like writing. And if you're a professional writer, there are many, many days where you don't feel like writing, but you've got to write. You know, you've got a deadline, you've got a goal, you've got a word count or a page count. You set for yourself. You've got, I want to get this much done by Friday, or this much done by 5 this evening, and sometimes you need a little kick in the butt to get started. And that was Archie's advice. He says if you take nothing else from this course, it will teach you how to write when you don't feel like writing. And he was right. He was right, because he was always right. Now, another great piece of advice I got was, and I've related this before, from Scott Peterson when I was reluctant to write the Joker, or not certain of how to write the Joker. Because you don't want to write a bad Joker story because everyone will remember it. You can write a bad Kite Man story and nobody's going to care. You write a bad Joker story and it's going to be waggled in your face for the rest of your life. Like, your Joker story sucked. And I said this to Scott Peterson, and he said, well, just think of the Joker as a guy who reinvents himself every morning. In other words, every day he wakes up a different person with a different set of goals and priorities. And that really helped. That really nailed it for me. And I felt liberated to write the Joker basically any way I wanted without being concerned about how he had been written before, because, what happened before, the Joker is unburdened by, to quote someone recently in the news. Now, another great piece of advice came when I got invited to go to the first Bat Summit. And I was reluctant to go because I was the Robin writer. And I thought, well, I was reluctant to basically go anywhere where I had to socialize a lot with people who employed me. Because I wasn't afraid I was going to say the wrong thing. I always knew I was going to say the wrong thing. So I don't seem to have a governor on my mouth. There's nothing between my thoughts and what I say, saying, don't say that. And I thought, well, I'm just going to get in more trouble if I go to this thing. And I really was concerned about it. And I was visiting Marvel, and I was talking to Don Daly. And Don Daly had been an assistant to Denny O'Neil, so he knew very much Denny's mindset about this stuff, was familiar with the man. And I said, hey, I don't know if I should go to this thing. And Don said, how long do you want to be in this business? And I said, till the day I die. He said, then you got to go to this retreat. You got to go to this Bat Summit. And he was right. He was right. Don was Don, but I love Don like a brother. He always gave me good advice. He was always up front, and he never had to worry that there were some Machiavellian, motives to whatever he said. He was like me. He just said what was on his mind, whether it got him in trouble or not. And it always got him in trouble. But thank you, Don. That was sage advice. So, editors aren't always bad. In fact, editors for the majority are good. It's just we remember the bad ones because the stories are so good. Triple spin. Joshua comes back with one more. What are your favorite theme songs of all time? Well, number one for me, Man from U.N.C.L.E. theme, which is my ringtone on my phone. Drives my wife crazy. Just a really cool Jerry Goldsmith, theme. It's just, 60s spy guy, a little bit of surf guitar, a little bit of this, it has all of the feel of the James Bond theme, but without ever aping any of it, because Goldsmith was an original. And I just really like it. Now, in recent years, and my wife agrees with me on this one, is a show that had a hell of a theme song was The Virginian. And it was an instrumental theme song by Percy Faith. And it was like the ultimate hard riding, hard shooting cowboy theme song, much like Elmer Bernstein kind of thing. But, full orchestra, and, it rises and falls, and it's really thrilling and everything else. And I think it's we were watching episodes of it recently. It was a series I never really watched before. And we were watching it, and my wife said, boy, that theme song really kicks butt. She didn't say those words exactly, but she said that theme song is she said, I think that's the best TV theme song ever. And I'm not going to disagree with her. It's a goodie. Hey, The Horseman. The Horseman is here. The Horseman. You can pre-order The Horseman. I'm heading down next week to Tejas, to Texas, to sign a bunch of them. So there's a bunch of them, thousands of them for you. And The Horseman is a vigilante character created by me and Joe Bennett. He's part of the Rippaverse. He's all the best parts of Batman and the Punisher, with some differences of his own. As Hector Caballero, the Horseman, has people in his life he cares about, continues to care about. So he's not the twisted, psychotic loner of a vigilante that you're used to seeing. It's all from your fine friends at Rippaverse. If you have questions, suggestions, or whatever, send it along to brunobookstore@gmail.com. brunobookstore@gmail.com is the most reliable way of reaching me with your questions, suggestions, and the rest. So, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. And I will see all of you, I hope, down the road.
Yet another password.
Yeah, I'm all right with that.
Stream your favorite shows.
Get the day's top headlines.
And access our podcast archives.
All with the new WMAL app.
Thank you.
Get the WMAL app today on Google Play or the Apple App Store. And stay connected.
You provide the passion. Mervis provides the diamond. Only the best quality. Mervis Diamond Importers.
Diabetes, high blood pressure, anxiety meds, everyone's on them. If you're a 40-year-old male, maybe a bit porky, and you may even have type 2 diabetes, $1 million of term life insurance may only cost you about $100 a month. Call Term Providers. Speak with Big Lou at 800-239-1749. Big Lou will find a term life policy for you even if you have type 2 diabetes, are overweight, or have high blood pressure. Term Providers help thousands of people like you who think they can't afford term life insurance. To buy $1 million of affordable term life for you, all you need to do is call Big Lou at 800-239-1749. Lou will make sure the scales are tipped in your favor. Call 800-239-1749. Big Lou will answer your call and work to fit you into a term life policy that you can afford. Remember, Big Lou's like you. He's on